You know what time it is. Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! We're back with story time with Chris. Hi. How's it going? Ooh. Okay, Labyrinth, come on. All I'm gonna say is if your children, or if you haven't seen Jim Henson's Labyrinth, starring David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it's Jennifer Connelly, because I always get Mia Sara and Jennifer Connelly mixed up, because when they were in their early 20s, teens, they very much look similar to each other. One has a brighter personality than the other, but we can talk about that in another time. But if you haven't seen Labyrinth, check it out. This is an ambient version of the music of Labyrinth, brought to you by none other than Mr. Ambiance. Send them some love on YouTube, if you please. And as I always try to say, my link is in the bio of my Facebook as well as my Instagram for my YouTube channel for Storytime with Chris. Like, share, subscribe. Please do so. We do appreciate the support. I don't do this for profit. I do this to get kids as well as adults engaged in the magic and wonder of literature. Ooh. And we are back. So, I'm going to just say this. For my friends of Wales, for my Welsh friends, if I butcher the pronunciation of some of these names, please be patient with me and kindly correct me in the comments, or just personally message me the proper pronunciation of certain characters or places, names. So, not to say that anybody has complained, it's just that I want to always open the floor for critique, for constructive criticism. All right. So, apparently, in the midst of our adventurers heading to Cauldron, which is the realm of King Smoit, who was not allowed to come on this venture, even though he is a powerful king, both physically and when it comes to controlling his lands. But they've kind of gone off the path and gone into this forest. And Dolly, who is part of the fair folk, he is a dwarf, but he is part of the greater community known as the fair folk, the enchanted beings that live in the world of Prydain. And apparently one of the fair folk is not wanting to be helpful. And it took even Princess Eilonwy to speak up. And now this being, this creature, is about to make themselves known. All right. Chapter 6. Dolly hurriedly pushed Eilonwy aside and ducked his head back into the tree trunk. He began shouting again, but the dead wood so muffled the sound that Tarn could distinguish nothing of the conversation, which consisted mainly of long outbursts from the dwarf, followed by brief and reluctant answers. At length, Dolly straightened up and beckoned the others to follow. He set off at a great rate directly across the woodland, and after little more than 100 paces, he jumped down at a jutting bank. Tarn, leading the dwarf's pony as well as Melilas, hastened to join him. Adion, Eladir, and the bar turned their mounts rapidly and were soon behind them. The bank was so steeply inclined and overgrown that the horses could barely keep their footing. They stepped delicately among the brambles and exposed rocks. Islomac tossed her mane and whinnied nervously. The bard's mount came near to falling onto her haunches, and even Melilas snorted a protest against the difficult slope. By the time Tarn reached a shelf of level ground, Dolly had run to the protected face of the embankment and was fuming impatiently before a huge tangle of thorn bushes. To Tarn's amazement, the brambles began to shudder as though being pushed from inside, though with much scraping and snapping of twigs, the whole mass opened a crack.
"It's a waypost of the fair folk," Eilonwy cried. "I knew they had them every which where, but leave it to good old Dolly to find one."
As Taran reached the dwarf's side, the portal opened wide enough for him to glimpse a figure behind it. Dolly peered inside.
So it's you, Gwilstyle, he said. I might have known.
Oh, so it's you, Dolly, a sad voice replied. I wish you'd given me a little warning.
Warning! Cried the dwarf. I'll give you more than a warning if you don't open up. Idleleg will hear of this. What's good a waypost if you can't get into it when you have to? You know the rules. If any of the fair folk are in danger, well, that's what we are in right now. On top of everything else, I could have shouted myself hoarse.
He gave a furious kick at the brambles. The figure heaved a long and melancholy sigh. And the portal opened wider. Taran saw a creature which at first glance looked like a bundle of sticks with cobwebs floating at the top. He realized quickly the strange doorkeeper resembled certain of the fair folk he had once seen in Idleleg's kingdom. Only this individual seemed in a woeful state of disrepair. Unlike Dolly, Gwystyle was not of the dwarf kindred. Though taller, he was extremely thin. His sparse hair was long and stringy. His nose dropped warily above his upper lip, which in turn drooped toward his chin in a most mournful expression. Wrinkles puckered his forehead, his eyes blinked anxiously, and he seemed on the verge of bursting into tears. Around his bent shoulders were draped a shabby, grimy robe, which he figured nervously. He sniffed several times, sighed again, and grudgingly beckoned Dolly to enter. There we go. Making sure we don't have any interruptions. There we go. Gurgi and Fluter had come up behind Taran. I'm pretty sure I'm saying this properly. It's just I've never heard of a name like this, but I like it because it is so unique. But I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it properly. It's Gwystyle. Gwystyle. Gwistle. There we go. I think I'm pretty on it. Gwistle. Gwydion, Gwistle, Melalas, Islomac. Oh no, he said. Not humans. Another day, perhaps. I'm sorry, Dolly. Believe me, but not the humans.
They're with me, snapped the dwarf. They claim fair folk protection, and I'll see they get it.
Fluter's horse, slipping among the branches, whinnied loudly. At this, Gwistle clapped a hand to his forehead. Horses, he sobbed. That's out of the question. Bring in your humans if you must, but not horses. Not horses. Today, Dolly. I'm simply not up to horses today. Please, Dolly, he moaned. Don't do this to me. I'm not well. Not at all well, really. I couldn't think of it. All the snorting and stamping and big bony heads. Besides, there's no room at all.
What place is this? Eladir questioned angrily. Where have you led us, dwarf? My horse does not leave my side. Climb into this rat hole, the rest of you. I shall guard Islomac myself. We can't leave the horses above ground, Dolly told Gwistle. He had already begun to retreat into the passagery. Find room or make room, he ordered. That's flat.
Sniffling, groaning, shaking his head, Gwistle, with great reluctance, heaved the doorway open to its full width. Very well, he sighed. Bring them in. Bring them all in. If you know any others, invite them too. It doesn't matter. I only suggested an appeal to your generous heart. Dolly, but I don't care now. It makes no difference. This is a very melancholy fellow. The word melancholy here, kids, means someone who has a perpetual state of sadness or despair and just overall like somber demeanor all the time. Somebody who's always sad. And there's nothing wrong with being melancholy, because even melancholy people can still enjoy life. They always are just sad. They revel in their sadness. Taran began to think Gwistle had gone good reason for concern. The portal was barely high enough for the animals to pass through. Only with difficulty did Adion's tall steed enter, and Islamak rolled her eyes frantically as the thorns tore at her flanks. Once past this barrier, however, Taran saw they had entered a kind of gallery, long and low-ceilinged. One side of it was solid earth, the other a dense screen of thorns and branches, impossible to see through, but with enough cracks and crevices to emit a little air. "You can put the horses in there, I suppose," sighed Gwistel, fluttering his hands in the direction of the gallery. "I cleaned it not long ago. I wasn't expecting to have it turned into a stable, but go ahead, it doesn't make any difference." Choking and sighing to himself, Gwistel then led the companions through a damp-smelling passageway. On one side, Taran noticed an alcove had been hollowed out. It was filled with roots, lichens, and mushrooms, the food stock, he guessed, of the melancholy inhabitant. Water dripped from the dirt roof or ran in rivulets down the wall. An odor of loam and dead leaves hung in the corridor. Further on, the passage opened into a round chamber. Here a small fire of sod flickered on a tiny ash-laden hearth and gave out frequent puffs of sharp nose-tickling smoke. A disorderly pallet of straw lay nearby. There was a broken table, 2 stools, and a vast number of bunches of herbs hung against the wall, drying. Some attempt had been made to smooth the sides of the wall itself, but here and there the twisting fingers of roots poked through. The chamber was intensely hot and stuffy. Gwistel shuddered and pulled his robe closer about his shoulders. Very cozy," Fluter remarked, coughing violently. Gurgi hurried to the fireplace and, despite the smoke, flung himself down beside it. Adion, who could barely stand to his full height, seemingly paid no attention to the disorder but went to Gwistel and bowed courteously. "We thank you for your hospitality," Adion said. "We've been hard-pressed."
"Hospitality!" snapped Dolly. "We've seen precious little of that. Get along, Gwistel, and fetch something to eat and drink."
"Oh, to be sure, mumbled Gwistel. "If you really want to take the time, when did you say you were leaving?" Ilanwe gave a cry of delight.
Look, he has a tame crow.
Near the fire, on a tree limb fashioned into a crude perch, crouched a heap of shadows which Taran realized was indeed a large crow. With Ilanwe, he hurried over to look at it. The crow resembled more a humpy ball with straggling tail feathers as wispy and disordered as Gwistel's cobwebby hair, but its eyes were sharp and bright, and they peered at Taran critically. With a few dry clicks, the bird polished its beak on the perch and cocked its head.
It's a lovely crow, Ilanwe said, though I'd never seen one with feathers quite like it. They're unusual, but very handsome once you get used to them.
Since the crow did not object, Taran gently stirred the feathers around its neck and ran a finger under the bird's sharp and gleaming beak. With sudden sadness he remembered the fledgling Gwaith he had befriended long ago, it seemed. From the first book, for those who've been here for a while. The Gwythaith that he nursed back to health on their way to get to Gwydion's kingdom, the House of Dawn. That same Gwythaith ended up summoning Gwydion to Taran's side when he was being attacked by the Horned King. But that's another story for another day. And wondered how the bird had fared. The crow, meantime, was enjoying an attention it evidently did not usually receive. It bobbed its head, blinked happily, and attempted to run its beak through Taran's hair.
What's its name?
Ilanwe asked. Name, answered Gwistel. Oh, his name is Ka, because the noise he makes, you see. Something like that, he added vaguely. Ka! Exclaimed Fluter, who had been watching with interest. Excellent! How clever! I should never have thought of giving it a name like that. He nodded in pleasure and approval. While Taran smoothed the feathers of the delighted crow, Adion set about examining El-Adir's wound. From a small wallet at his belt he drew out a handful of dried herbs which he ground into a powder. What? Are you a healer as well as a dreamer? Said El-Adir. If it does not trouble me, why does it trouble you? If you do not choose to take it as a kindness, Adion answered, unperturbed and continuing to treat the cut, take it as a precaution. There is hard and dangerous travel before us. I would not have you fall ill and delay us. I shall not be the one to delay you, El-Adir replied. I would have stood my ground when the chance was offered. Now we've let ourselves be run into earth like foxes. Gwistle had been peering anxiously over Adion's shoulder. Do you have anything that might be useful for my condition? He asked tremulously. No, I don't suppose you do. Well, no matter. There's nothing to be done about the dampness and the drafts. No, they'll last longer than you can be sure, he added in a dismal voice.
Stop muttering about the drafts, Dolly ordered briskly, and think of some way to get us out of here safely. If you're in charge of a waypost, you're supposed to be ready in emergencies. He turned away furious. I don't know what our leg was thinking when he put you here.
I've often wondered that, Gwistle agreed with a melancholy sigh. It's much too close to a Nuven for any decent kind of person to knock at your door. I don't mean any of you, he added hurriedly, but it's bleak, nothing of interest, really. No, Dolly, I'm afraid there's nothing I can do for you, except set you on your way as quickly as possible. What about the huntsmen? Taran put in. If they're still tracking us. Huntsmen? Gwistle turned a sickly greenish white and his hands trembled. How on earth did you come across them? I'm sorry to hear that. If I'd have known before, it might have been possible. No, it's too late for that. They'll be all over the place now. No, really, you could have shown a little more consideration.
You might think we wanted to have them after us, cried Eilonwy, unable to curb her impatience. That's like inviting a bee to come and sting you.
At the girl's outburst, Gwistle shriveled up in his robe and looked more dismal than ever. He choked, wiped his forehead with a trembling hand, and let a large tear roll down his nose. I didn't mean it that way, my dear child. Believe me. Gwistle sniffed. I just don't see what's to be done about it. If anything at all, you got yourself into a dreadful predicament. How or why, I'm sure I can't imagine. Gwydion had led us to attack Arorn, Taran began. Gwistle hurriedly raised a hand. Don't tell me, he interrupted with an anxious frown. Whatever it is, I don't want to hear it. I'd rather not know. I don't want to get caught up in any of your mad schemes. Gwydion? I'm surprised he at least didn't know better. But it's to be expected, I suppose. There's no use complaining. Our quest is urgent, said Adion, who had finished binding Elidir's wound and had come to stand near Gwistle. We ask you to do nothing to endanger yourself. I will not tell you the circumstances that brought us here, but without knowing them, you cannot realize how desperately we need your help. We had come to seize the cauldron from a Nuven, Taran said. Cauldron, murmured Gwistle.
Yes, the cauldron, shouted the furious dwarf. You pale grub, you lightless lightning bug. The cauldron of Aurorn's cauldron born.
Oh, that cauldron, Gwistle answered feebly. Forgive me, Dolly. I was thinking of something else. When did you say you were going? The dwarf seemed on the verge of seizing Gwistle by his robe and shaking him, but Adion stepped forward and quickly explained what had occurred at Darkgate. It's a shame, Gwistle murmured with a sorrowful sigh. You should never have got mixed up with that thing. It's too late to think about that, I'm afraid. You'll just have to make the best of it. I don't envy you. Believe me, I don't. It's one of those unfortunate events. But you don't understand, Taran said. We aren't mixed up with the cauldron. It isn't in a Nuven anymore. Someone has already stolen it. Yes, said Gwistle with a gloomy look at Taran. Yes, I know. And that is where we will end for tonight. I love, to quote Mrs. Fieldmouse from Don Bluth Thumbelina, I love stories, don't you? Which, if I'm not mistaken, she was voiced by the actress Carol Channing, who is one of my... I love Carol Channing. The reason why I love Carol Channing is, like myself, she has a very distinctive voice.
Yeah, she's so great, young man.
I love Carol Channing. I wish I would have gotten the opportunity to have met her in person because she voiced a lot of childhood characters of mine. A lot of the voices that I use when I do Storytime with Chris mostly come from animated movies, puppet films, claymation films. So a lot of those inspirations are inspired for that, and even some of these are inspired from the Disney Black Cauldron film. So I love playing with these voices and really like personifying these characters because yes, they are creatures on paper, but they still are worthwhile characters to get engaged with and read and listen to. So, without further ado, I will see you all tomorrow for our very special presentation of A Child's Christmas in Wales, and I will see you all tomorrow night at 7:30 sharp. So don't be late. I'll see you then. Bye-bye, y'all.